Alrighty, so I've got another meta update for you, and this is coming right after the Portland Sector first major event we've had since the Force Throw suspension. So I'm going to be covering that whole event, talking about the meta as a whole, and yeah, get you up to date. So before we get going, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so I'll be reviewing the whole Portland Sector. We'll be talking about the day one meta, what that means, how you can use that to help you prepare. Then we'll be talking about the day two conversions, and this is probably the most important data we get for one standalone event. I, of course, will review some decks. I will cover the top 8 decks, because that's, the cutoff we usually use, but I do recommend you kind of go to SOU Competitive Hub or the Melee link, and you'll be able to check decks that placed right outside the top 8 that just maybe missed on breakers or one extra loss. And those decks, of course, you can draw some inspiration from as well. And then finally, I'll kind of recap what I'm thinking about the meta right now, what you can do moving forward, especially if you're going to be playing in the regional in Spain in just about a week, or if you have any last PQs coming up towards the end of the season. Remember, not that much time left with this season, with this cycle, the Legends of the Force cycle. In the beginning of November, we get set 6, and a lot of attention soon will start heading towards figuring out the set 6 meta. So let's talk about the Portland Sector. This was the day one, and look, there's a lot of noise in this, of course, right? Basically, everything you can see on that left side is mostly statistical noise. On the right, we can get a bit of an idea of what you should expect. And the top 5 here in terms of day one representation, I think a lot of people probably could have guessed this. We had Han 2, who maintains a very high play rate and a very high win rate after the Force Throw suspension. Did mention after that Force Throw ban that I thought if any of the decks were going to kind of maintain where they were, it was probably just going to be Han 2, because he does a bunch of other unfair things, and a lot of people seemed to agree, and you see 11.4% of the day one population played the deck. Second was the Boba. Actually, Boba and Cad Bane were both tied for 8% of the field. Now, Boba Green, it's almost entirely Boba Green. It gets played a lot. I'm actually not super high on the deck in general, but I know it gets played a lot. It's certainly something you will need to expect, and this kind of solidifies that. Cad Bane Tarkin Town is the other 8%. This, I can't tell you exactly how many of these CADs were playing the one drop spam version versus the more mid-range centric version, but they're all playing Tarkin Town. And then we had Han 1 making his grand reopening, so to speak, into the meta ever since Force Throw has been suspended. This was probably the leader that most people thought would be unlocked, and here we go, almost 8% of the field. Mostly Han Green, but some Han Blue as well. And then the 5th was Sabine. And Sabine, basically, for all existence, has been somewhere in the top 5 of play rate. I think this is too high for Sabine. I do not think this meta is friendly towards this leader at all. I think the game has kind of caught up to her power level, but she continues to be one of the most played leaders in the game, no matter what the meta around her looks like, which means if you're playing a deck that folds to Sabine, you're making that decision, right? Because Sabine probably is not going away. If you look more down, we see it jumps all the way down to 4.3%. Grand Admiral Thrawn, interesting to see that. We see Vader, mostly Vader Yellow, the pilot, at 4%, and some other, small groupings, Gar Saxon, Kira. I actually did expect a little more Kira, but not a lot of people showing up with Kira these days. You see Yoda and Palp at 2.8. The rest of this, it's very difficult to kind of say, oh, you need to prepare for. I think outside of these top 5, and maybe based on the results of this tournament, a couple other decks that you'll need to start prepping for. But For the meantime, those are kind of the ones you should expect early on in the field. Now let's take a look at what happened with the conversions. So we are living in a Han world, and it's not just one Han, it's two different Hans, but 23 of the 61 decks in day 2 were Han, and it's 12 Han 1s. I believe 11 of them or so were green. I don't remember exactly, but I believe there was one blue. And then we see Han 2 with 11, and I think everyone except one was playing blue, and there was one Data Vault Han 2 in day 2. Then we see Cad Bane, 6 copies. He had a decent conversion rate. Past that, Gar, Vader, they were both at around 4% of the early field, so they seem to kind of convert on that pace. Kylo, I know 3 of these Kylos were Tarkin Town. I don't know what the 4th one is, and the 3 that were playing Tarkin Town were 3 members of the BN squad who were playing Kylo Tarkin Town at Galactics. They were part of the large team that brought that whole deck onto the stage. Can I say for certainty that I think Kylo Tarkin Town has survived through this Force Throw ban because a few of them made day 2? I can't. I still mostly think that outside of the Hero Blue Force decks, the decks that were running Force Throw have mostly been culled from the format. And Kylo, I think maybe he survives a little more than Quinlan and Talzin, but still I think lost a huge power level there. We see a few Anakins, which you can group that a little bit into the Han 2. It's a Hero Blue Force deck. And then some Kiras and, Yoda's, Palps. The rest is, also a little noise, right? It's 1 or 2 copies. See Sabine and Boba underperforming their day 1 representation by a lot. Only 2 made it. And yeah, that's what this looks like. And moving forward, you should expect about maybe close to half of the winner's bracket to involve one of the 2 Hans. I don't think Cad's going anywhere, and then you're going to see just a mix of things for the most part. All right, so this is the top 8, and we're going to go deck by deck. Big shout out to my teammate, Bobby Sapphire, or Mike. He took down this whole tournament with Palp Yellow, so we'll kind of have to think about what that means moving forward, because it probably is the largest event to date that a Palp has won, and Palp is typically not a highly represented deck, but if he all of a sudden does become a highly represented deck, that could mean some problems for these Hero Blue Force decks. But in this top 8, we also see 3 Han 2 blues and 1 Anakin blue, so 4 Hero Blue Force decks. Goes to for certainty, this Han Blue deck did not go anywhere with Force Throw gone. In fact, its positioning in the format might have improved. We also see 1 Cad, 1 Kira, and 1 Han Green. That's another one of my teammates, Justin. He made the top 8 with the Han 1 Green. So big shout out to my boys, Justin and Mike, and of course to the rest of this top 8 as well. Congrats to all of you, and let's take a look at the deck lists now. So first place, here's the Palp Yellow, and there's some really interesting new cards, of course, in this set that has, I think, propelled this to a much stronger deck than it used to be. And the main one is Legacy Run, which is a very powerful card for this deck, right? For 6 resources, so to speak, you can throw it with Palp and do 7 damage. You kind of built your own overwhelming barrage. It has a lot of synergy with Palp's ability, and it really helps into controlling matchups. Lothcat is another interesting new card that has played pretty well in this Palp deck. You can see 1 Fennec here as kind of like the 4th Vader. Fennec, once it sticks on the board, is a really difficult thing for some decks to handle. Early game, this deck has McClunky loops. It's trying to pick things off with ISB Agent and P38. It has Bazine to interrupt. Contracted Hunter is another really nice addition for these Palp decks, because if you wait until the Force resource turn, you can actually ambush with it and, of course, throw it at something with Palp, so you don't have to just lose the unit. And I think one of the key things here is Sneak Attack, which is a great anti-aggro card. It can really help keep you from falling so far behind. Yes, you're maybe sometimes down cards, but that's the great thing about Palp. He draws cards. He's going to help you catch up there. And No Good to Me Dead is another really important card in the meta that includes Han Green. Post board, you see some anti-space stuff with Eager Escort, some anti-control with Relentless. You see that one EMP as well for mostly space aggro decks. And that third No Good to Me Dead. Palp's Return, of course, comes in with those Relentlesses in grindy matchups. So, again, big shout out to Mike. Well-earned victory. What does this mean moving forward? I've mentioned this already. If you think Palp all of a sudden is going to like go from a 2% of a meta share deck to a 5 or 6% meta share deck, then all of a sudden that might change the landscape a little bit and what decks you should be running, because this deck really does eat up these like hero mid-range decks. That's its bread and butter. And yeah, you have to keep that in mind. All right, second place, Anakin Blue by the Pyro. This looks very similar to Anakin Blue pre-Force Throw suspension, except now it doesn't have Force Throw. The nice thing about Anakin, it has like the best use, I think, out of Marin, because it can attack for 6 with Marin, which is really nice, right? You get the 4+2 from Marin's ability, which helps you increases your justification to running that card, which then goes hand in hand with all those villainous cards that you can run to turn on the Anakin, the 5/7/6 drop. So that's kind of a really nice package that I think Anakin does better than Han 2 does, because Marin is just a much better card in this deck. Jedi Starfighter is another like Anakin specific card, because all of a sudden you have this card that can attack for 4 in space, so that can kill things like Falcons, etc. Other than that, yeah, this is your hero force deck. You got some Jedi lightsabers here, which I think, those are to spike games off of Anakin, and they work really well sometimes. You don't see much of a main deck discard package. I think that kind of makes sense now, because before you could run like Pillages and Force Throws in this deck. With Force Throw gone, Pillage maybe isn't so much of a main deck consideration anymore, but you see it in the side along with an extra Rivals Fall. You see some anti-space stuff with like Concords and Bombing Run, some upgrade hate. Champ Syndulla, a fantastic card against like Han Green, for instance, or Kira. And then, you got that third Crate Dragon there as well. So, there's not a ton new here going on, but this Hero Red Blue Force package is just incredibly powerful, right? Ki-Adi-Mundi, Chirrut, Itinerant Warrior, that package of cards, right? There's not even like Mace Windu in this deck, right? It's playing Anakin in that 6-drop slot. So the cards that use the Force are just those 4 drops, but they're so good. And especially with like Anakin, where like Itinerant Warrior, who's got this shield, you can attack for 6 into something. You just have a lot of power here. Now, I think Han 2 in a lot of matchups is going to be better than Anakin, but Anakin might actually be a little tougher in that head-to-head, for instance. And Anakin can do some really interesting things against the Han 1, because so many of these units have theoretically 4 power, right? There's Itinerant Warrior and Ki-Adi who have 4, but Marin as well. These are early units that can sit and play and actually potentially block a Han flip, which is a pretty powerful thing to be able to do with your leader. All right, third place, our first of the 3 Han 2 blues by DTS here. This is also playing the villain package. There's no Marin in this particular list. You could include that to add some ways to get those Force Lightnings or Power the Dark Sides into the discard pile, but you don't have to. Those cards, you can actually play them, right? Power the Dark Side for 5 is not terrible. Force Lightning, once you can also get to like 5 and have it deal 4 damage, it's okay. The rest of the deck, mostly very similar to what it used to look like. Entrench, I think, is a really good addition. It's, of course, a useful card to have against space decks, but it's also actually really good against Han 1, and not to like entrench his leader, but actually to entrench your own. You can entrench your own Han, turn him into a 6/9, and now he can just sit there and prevent your opponent from flipping. And, you know, if you can keep your Han 1 green opponent from doing like a 5 to 7 turn, you can often come out ahead in the late game with a deck like this. You see 3 copies of Poe here as well, and Poe is a good card right now, especially because if you do expect things like Boba, Vader, stuff like that, having a unit that you can play on the ground early that represents upgrade removal in play and also helps you race is really nice. Post board, you see 3 Chams. I think that makes perfect sense. Cham is even better in this deck than it is in Anakin. 1 Chewbacca, probably just to grind a little more. The grenade strikes, I think, are probably for things like Vader and the CAD 1-drop deck. Some upgrade removal, a 3rd Owen, a 3rd Crate. I think just this is, again, not a lot new going on here. It's just clear that this deck has survived through that Force-Throw suspension. And you also see these Hotshot Blasters, which now we see getting run out of aspect quite a lot. And yes, it's out of aspect because you usually want to smuggle it. All right, in 4th place, we see CAD Tarkin Town, and this is the 1-drop spam version. You see 15 1-drops in this deck. There's very little new going on here. Again, since the suspension, this deck was untouched. I think, of course, you should be running No Good To Me Dead in this deck right now because it's a very good card against Han 1, and Han 1 is maybe the like number 1 enemy or number 2 enemy currently. Yeah, this is the premise of this deck is you're playing a 1-drop, you kind of force your opponent to engage with you so that you can play that second 1-drop, Tarkin Town, and just kind of snowball from there. It's a very snowball-centric deck. Post-board, you do see Sneak Devastators coming in, presumably for longer game matchups, Bazine for control, Pillage for control, right? I think this whole sideboard is primarily for control decks, which, you know, can make sense. And then the Confiscates, maybe for pilots and things like that. Anyone trying to, like, slam at lightsabers and stuff. So, yeah, congrats to Cromulent here for his 4th place finish with CAD Tarkin Town. All right, into 5th place, we got Troy here with Han 2 Blue, and I'm looking through this list, and I think it's exactly the same as the other one we reviewed. You got the Hotshot Blasters, the Entrenches here, the sideboard. Actually, the sideboard is the same too, so I do not have this information on hand, but presumably these players were collaborating because I do think the 60 cards here are identical when I'm glancing at it. And yes, I'm glancing at it for the first time on this video, so excuse me as I kind of gloss through it. But yeah, congrats to Troy for his 5th place. Here we've got 6th place. This is Justin, my teammate with Han Green. And, you know, I had a couple other teammates playing this. Alex, he finished in 10th place, actually. And then also Sunny, who finished, I believe, somewhere in around 40. And all 3 of them were running Han Green, all made day 2. And here we had a top 8 finish. So big shout out to the squad. But Han Green, this is a very similar deck to how it looked in Jump to Lightspeed with a couple notable upgrades. Kellerin, absolutely fantastic in this deck. Like being able to cheat that out early and then really flood the board, huge. Also very good into control decks, which sometimes were a tough matchups, like a Kira matchup. It's a big get there. And we see Obi-Wan as a new 3-drop for this deck. And again, a very solid card, can help into aggro. It coming out of Kellerin sometimes can just save you games. So although the main deck here, like the shell, is very similar to how it used to look, there are some key upgrades. And we see Bamboozles in the main deck as a meta consideration, expecting pilots, especially like Boba Data Vault, but also Vader, to be pretty popular. I don't want anyone to think this deck is just like a pilot spam deck. There are pilots, right? There's Chewies and Hans, but this is not like a I play Falcon, I play pilot, and hope I win style game. There are matchups where you can do that, but this is not really like a turbo pilot deck. It does play enough 2-drops that often you can just play one of them on turn 1. You see L3s and R2s, but you do often need to resource on turn 1 as well. You've got Haulers here, which I know is a frightening card to play sometimes, but it's just very good in some matchups. Like against Sabine, it sometimes is your best opener because it's the thing that can dodge them going green unit into ECL Sabine's Masterpiece, whereas your Falcons do get defeated by that. But, you know, Han is back. No questions asked. Resource cheating is huge. Force being gone means this deck, which operates on first of all, on a smaller hand size than a lot of other decks, but also relies very heavily on a flip turn that lets its leader attack. And, you know, it was dangerous flipping a 6 health leader, getting it one shot by Force Throw and just losing the game on the spot. But that's not going to happen anymore. You are now free to do what you want. And, you know, green, I think, is probably my vote for the best Han version. I think resupply into like Ewing Kellerin is just a bigger get than being able to play Anakin 6-drop with like free rolling the villain cards. That's basically the big get that blue has. And green, yeah, like resupply. It's just crazy in this deck. So post board, you're also seeing extra 7s, Kellerin and Enfys here, some Plo Koons for like more mid-rangey fights, maybe into like Han 2, extra Waylay, some Sparks for control, and Confiscates. And this is, I think the Confiscates are also a consideration for people doing things with Entrench, which, you know, we saw these Han 2s running Entrench to try to brick your leader, and then you kind of one-up them with the Confiscate so that you can still flip. So, yeah, again, congrats to Justin. All right, and here's the third Han 2 blue, and this is Alex Krez, and I know he just actually won a PQ with this deck shortly, like maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. But again, similar shell. You do see Mace Windu 6-drop in this version, so he's playing a little more robust in that mid-range, right? You see 3 Anakins and 2 Maces and all 3 crates in the main deck. So playing a little more greedy towards the top end to help, you know, in mirrors and into control, maybe have a little less on that bottom end. You see some Marin, so he did decide to run Marin with the power of the dark side. There's no Force Lightnings in this main deck, so it's just the 3 powers to kind of turn on that Anakin. But, you know, 3 copies can get there a decent amount of time. And yeah, the pose, I think, make perfect sense, just like I said with the other Hans, having this unit on the ground that can snipe those pilots. Post board, you see double Tranquility, which is different from the other version, and that's going to help into like Kira decks or Iden decks. Basically, you can kind of infinitely loop that card. One buys back the other, and then back and forth. Just really good for grinding, right? You see Chams, we saw that. Rivals Falls, the other versions had one in the main. We see 2 in the sideboard here. A third Open Fire, another Fell. So just more removal for the decks where that removal is good. But congrats to Alex. And let's take a look at the last one. And this is a Kira deck by Brahmer. And there are a lot of differences here from like some other Kira decks we've seen. And the notable one here is that there is no Timely Intervention or Darth Vader 6-drop. And I think I mentioned maybe a week or 2 ago, I made a video where I talked about whether or not it was still worth including that Darth Vader. Have we kind of gone too far and just slamming this? Now, I'm still not sure if it's right or wrong, but Brahmer here certainly decided he thought Vader and Timely was not where he wanted to be, and he gets to a top 8 without those cards in the deck. Timely Vader, it's an incredibly powerful interaction. It's just uses up a lot of deck space, and you know those Vaders don't do anything if you don't draw Timely or don't draw Timely in time, or your opponent doesn't give you good targets for the Vader. And then, you know, sometimes those Timelies also just do nothing because you're not getting to the point in the game where you can effectively Timely like a Reinforcement Walker or an Avenger or something like that. So yeah, I think it's certainly justified to try without it. Other than that, we see some other different cards that you don't typically see in a Kira deck, like Night Sister Warrior, 2/2 draw card. I don't see much synergy for it specifically. Just, I think he, instead of Hylobon, which is what you often see as another turn 1 play here, you're just getting a card that's replacing itself. Sometimes maybe you can sequence this with like a Death Trooper or a Devastating Gunship so that its 2 damage actually helps you finish something off. But other than that, it's maybe just there to like get you churning through your deck. See a couple Anakins in this deck. Now, there is no heroism card here, so he's just for the -3/-3, which I think is solid. I've played Eighth Brother a lot, and I've enjoyed that as a 6-drop. He's also a 5/7, but instead of giving -3/-3, he just ambushes for 5. So Anakin, of course, can hit into space. If you have other units in play, he can also shrink them so that you can get a nice attack into them. But, you know, just a little bit more chunk in that bridge turn before you get into your 7, which is where you start spamming Vaders and Mauls and stuff like that. See 1 Restock and 3 Vigilance, so hedging a little bit towards control. Even 1 Relentless in this main deck. Maybe expected some control. Even 1 Palp's Return, actually. So I think pretty main decked to help in control, and even more post-board. We see 2 Annihilators, a Relentless, 2 Palp's Return, so very heavy in the anti-control. A couple regional governors there in the sideboard. Can't tell you exactly what matchup I think they're there for, but, you know, maybe in mirrors, or like into hard control where you just need to shut off like a super laser blast, something like that. Moisture Farmer, I think this is just like going to be a passive unit that tries to heal you 2 every turn, or at least make your opponent bash into it, and then it heals you like 4 because they have to kill it. So, you know, this Kira shell is a little different than we've seen in the past. There's even like Space Sentinels, the Supremacy Tie, which is a solid card. It can come out of Vaders as well. But primarily it still functions as, you know, the Kira that you've grown to appreciate or not appreciate, and it does not have Timely Vader. So take it from me, I've tried both versions. I still can't tell you if Timely Vader is like objectively right or wrong in this deck, but I do think it's worth considering running Kira without it. All right, so we're done with the top 8 recap. So let's just do a little bit of a meta overview. So Han, he's back. If he's Han 1, he didn't go anywhere. If he's Han 2, these are 2 kind of evergreen style leaders because they both are just resource cheating with basically no restrictions, right? It's very free resource cheating, and they've been in and out of like top spots in meta basically ever since they've existed. Han 1 in set 1, Han 2 in set 2. So do think you should expect these leaders to continue to be very powerful moving forward as long as they're legal. The usual suspects were around, like Cad, Boba, and Sabine, but, you know, Boba and Sabine underperforming, and I don't think that's that much of a surprise. And I can't tell you people will stop playing them. They probably won't. So you still should be preparing for kind of these usual suspects. There's not many new decks with the post-Force Throw ban. We didn't see any, like, new Force decks come out with set, like, 5 specific stuff. It was still just, like, Hero Blue Red, which was like headlined by Han and then had some Anakin. And, you know, those decks survived the Force Throw ban. The decks that didn't, Quinlan, Talzin, Kylo. I have a question mark next to Kylo because there were 3 of them that made day 2. I still think mostly Kylo Tarkin Town has taken a huge hit. Quinlan and Talzin have taken massive hits. Palp winning, I mentioned this too. That does maybe change the landscape a little bit if the deck gets copied or people start moving into Palp, right? It hasn't happened so far. Like, even when Palp has like 1 PQs or topped something, it usually is not the kind of deck that a large population starts playing. If it is, though, that would be a major shift in the meta, and would potentially change the landscape for the last few weeks of this cycle. But yeah, the cycle's wrapping up. Next week, we got the regional. And then it's, you know, mostly just PQs. I know there is one last sector. It's happening in the first week of November, which is actually overlapping with Set 6 pre-release. It's a very interesting timing for a large event. I don't know how much attention there will be to Set 5 going on when there's pre-releases for Set 6 happening. But, you know, if you're going to Spain, good luck. If you've got some PQs coming up in the next few weeks, hope this can help you prep moving forward. But yeah, that's what I got for you. Hope you enjoyed this, and let me know what you think. Till next time, take care.